Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog for the first time during the 2020 French Open, and it is October. It's all changed this year. I think we're kind of used to it by now. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be here for the first round, but I'll try and give it a little bit of extra time this time around because we'll be looking back at the first and second round of action, which hasn't been without its drama and points of interest, and some pretty good tennis as well. So keep your questions coming in quickly because I want to get going ASAP. Thanks to those that have already sent some in. And we'll just get going. So obviously the big news, Serena Williams pulled out after her first round. I mean, she wasn't as much of a favourite here anyway, but that was definitely a big name out of the top half of the women's draw. On the same day, Victoria Azarenka, the only US Open finalist present, lost. So that opened up the top half of the draw a bit. On the men's side, Nadal, Djokovic team all still standing. So it's a little bit more predictable, let's say, on the men's side, but for the women, very wide open, which we're used to seeing at the moment. So let's see some of what you've got to ask. Don't hold back, fire away, just so we can get going. First comment on the chat says Andrei Rublev to reach the semi-final, which is a nice, confident prediction there. Anyone that follows me on Twitter or social media will know that I had my doubts because the two guys that I viewed as particular threats to Novak Djokovic in his half, which is, if we're honest, the weaker half of the draw, the two guys that I saw potentially being able to give him the most trouble were Andrei Rublev and Stefanos Tsitsipas, who played particularly well in Paris last year and lost a really close one to Stan Wawrinka, which was billed one of the matches of the year. My concern about those two players is that they both competed in an ATP final a matter of days ago. So on the first day of the French Open, Rublev and Wawrinka, no, not Wawrinka, you can tell it's late, Rublev and Tsitsipas were facing off against each other in the final of Hamburg. So they were in a different country playing a different event. They then had to make a quick turnaround to the French Open, and both of them actually, you did see how they were struggling to adjust to the conditions because both needed 5 sets to come through their first round. Looks precarious, but now that they've actually come through that, I think they're looking at a much better chance of going deep, because I thought it could be opening rounds trouble for both of them, but they seem to be steering their way through. Rublev actually looked, I think he looked pretty steady in his last round. I'm just gonna check what the, okay, so Davidovich Fokina, that's a pretty good win on clay. Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, he's a player that's been coming through over the last season. He's got a decent bit of variety in his game, so to come through that one only having dropped a set, I think that, yeah, Rublev is a pretty good pick in this men's draw to go a fair distance. I'm not sure semi-finals, but he's certainly got the form to keep going for now. I'm actually, off the top of my head, I'm struggling to remember exactly which section he would be in. So I don't know if he would face Tsitsipas in quarters or if he would face Djokovic, because at this point in time, I don't think I would not take him over Djokovic. But if he's got Tsitsipas, then yeah. So he's playing Kevin Anderson next. Then he'd have the winner of Marton Fucsovics versus Thiago Monteiro. So if he does come past Anderson, that's a very winnable match next up. And then he would potentially have Tsitsipas in the semis. This is not semis, quarters. So yeah, I think actually Rublev, strong pick for the semis. Now just completely lost my page, so I'm gonna have to drag that back up. Yeah, keep them coming in, keep the questions coming in. Let me know what you think of my opinions and answers as well, so I have a little conversation with you. Okay, your prediction on the semi-final lineup, possibly Nadal versus Team Clash. Who can stop Djokovic in the French Open? Well, as I was saying, I felt like the strongest threats for Djokovic on his actual side of the draw were probably Rublev and Tsitsipas. It's been a while since I've seen a French Open draw or any Grand Slam draw like this in which it is so obviously weighted on one side. I mean, looking even outside of seedings, so Djokovic got a good draw with the seedings because he had Medvedev as opposed to Thiem in his half, which was already a great thing for him because Thiem's beaten him, I think, twice in the past 3 French Opens. One time he edged him, one time he beat him pretty convincingly. So it was always going to be a relief for Djokovic not to have Thiem in his half anyway, but to have Medvedev as that top seed. Medvedev has not performed well here. I don't think Medvedev has even won a match here previously. So he's a fantastic player on hard courts and grass courts, but clay exposes his need for a rhythm. So yeah, I think that for me, when I looked at that draw, I thought Rublev and Tsitsipas are the only names that can really convince me that they could give Djokovic a go. But really, you know, Djokovic in the form that he's in, looking as comfortable as he does, should be well on his way to the final. If he were to get there, I mean, someone mentioned Rublev first off. I think that looking at the draw as it stands, Rublev is a good call to make semis. As far as the other half of the draw goes, based on what we've seen so far, and as much as Thiem has a horrible draw all the way through, I would be picking Nadal and Thiem to face off in a semi, which I think would be an epic match. I think it would be really good. Obviously, it's been the final the last couple of years. Thiem's in great form, having won the US. He's shown that he didn't really need clay court warm-up events coming into this one. He's looked pretty good to go from the offset. I think he's now worked his way into a game style team that just transitions well across all surfaces. And I've said it before, I'm seeing more and more of Nadal in his game, which fares well for him in Paris. Obviously, he beat Nadal at the Australian Open in January, so he's got that under his belt. So yeah, I think, and Nadal has been coping really well with the conditions. You know, they're different conditions in Paris. It's wet, it's been heavy, and as I said a few days ago, I think that's really highlighted how incredible Nadal's attitude is. Like, he's really just the ultimate professional. He hates these conditions, as we saw in Rome. Wet and heavy has always been a nightmare for him, but he knows that no amount of complaining or being mad about it or being unhappy, that's not going to help him. So he has just got his head down, got on with it. He seems to have been working really hard off the match court, on the practice courts, and when he's come to play the matches, he's looked as focused as ever, if not more so. There's this real serious air about Nadal in Paris, and yeah, I think that he looks good to go for the semis against Thiem. I would be taking Nadal in that clash because I think if he can continue to drill through the courts the way he has done so far, he should be well on track to win another title. You know, for Djokovic, he's never beaten a vintage Nadal here. He did beat him obviously in 2015, but that was Nadal's off year, mentally, physically struggling. So if Nadal gets to the final, I think he'll be in good physical form, and he's never lost at that stage. So however well Djokovic is playing, it's still going to be a big fight for him. So thank you for those first questions to warm us into this one nicely. Someone says Simona Halep versus Amanda Anisimova is the match of week 1. Yep, that will be 3rd round. Anisimova, I really consider a dark horse here. She has one of those game styles that you think would be a perfect fit for a fast court. She has a lot of flat, fast power. She can get good angles off the backhand. She's got a big, decent serve. So I think a lot of people would expect her to excel there, but she really did show us last year at the French Open that she can bring that power and that pace anywhere. And I think that surprised a few people last year. She did beat Halep last year when Halep was the defending champion. I believe that was in the quarters. And she looked unstoppable at times and really made Halep look the counterpuncher. It's easy to forget that Halep, you know, is a counterpuncher by nature because she does so well turning defense to attack, and she can step up, take the ball on the rise and play the attacking game when she needs to. But Anisimova will look to take time away from her. So I think that is probably the worry match for Halep. I did watch her last match against, I believe it was against Begu, Irina Camelia Begu. Let me check. Yeah, it was 6-3, 6-4 for Halep. Now, that's a deceptive scoreline because she did have leads in both sets, leads by a break, etc., and then lost them. So she was 3-love, nearly 4-love up in the first set, and then Begu came back to 3-all. She had the break advantage in the second set, and Begu is a player that was kind of made for clay courts. That's the surface that she thrives on. She made a premier semi on clay back in the day a few years ago. But I think there were points for concern for Halep in that match, given how well she's been playing of late. You know, if we go back to before lockdown, she's on a winning streak of, I think, 16 matches. Correct me if I'm wrong. So she brings the form in, but Anisimova is a very different player to Begu, and I think she'll be challenged a lot more. If she comes through that, I think you've got to consider her the favourite at the moment. But the thing with the French Open, as I've said several times before, I mean, with every women's Grand Slam, to be honest with you, but particularly with the French Open, it's not usually the obvious choice ahead of the event that comes out on top. So as much as Halep has looked convincing, it would be hard for me actually to go right out there and say that she's the favourite. I've actually got my eye on the likes, and I don't know if anyone will ask questions about these players, of Elena Ostapenko and Garbiñe Muguruza, you know, previous champions here who didn't necessarily have the form coming in, but definitely have the ability to do damage and are easing their way into the draw here. Ostapenko just got a great win over Karolina Pliskova, took the game to her, didn't let her get a foot in. So they are two names that I have my eye on outside of Halep. Not that that was part of your question, but I thought it might be a point of interest anyway. Novak versus Rublev and Team versus Rafa says someone for the semis, which is essentially what I said. It almost seems too obvious, doesn't it? I'm interested that as many people as have picked up on Rublev as the guy to come through, which is a testament to his form at the moment. I think he's done fantastic because he was really getting going back end of last year, brought it into this season, and then lockdown came at a truly terrible time for him, but he's been able to remember what was working and pick back up where he left off. So good for him, because other players who were in similarly good form, I'm thinking the likes of Denis Shapovalov, went out today. So it's a good thing for him, you know, that he's still going and he's still kind of backing up his current ranking. Someone asked the question if Stan Wawrinka can stop Dominic Thiem. Now, you know, I did say about that semi-final lineup previously, almost looks a bit too obvious. So if anyone's going to get it done, you know, Wawrinka is the kind of guy that could cause trouble, has won here previously, has brought form to this stage since then. Obviously, he beat Murray very comprehensively in the opening round. His next round, I did think watching him that I can't remember who he was playing off the top of my head. I've actually, like, every single day so far, I've just had tennis on all the way through, but not enough to kind of take in-depth notes on every single match because I've been trying to cover as many as possible. But yeah, so he played. Don't do this to me. Are we back? It has been way too long since we had that kind of issue. My Wi-Fi is the most terrible thing on the planet, and we'd done so well during the US Open that I didn't think I even had to worry anymore. But I guess I do. So anyway, back to where we are. You know, the strike, he's still got the disguise on his shots once they've got into a rally. Once he's up on top of the baseline, you've really got to be able to anticipate where he's going, and a lot of players haven't been able to do that. So that is buffering again. Drop me a line and let me know if you can still see or hear me, because it's gone on here. Yeah, but anyway, so with Wawrinka, yeah, he can cause Thiem trouble, but only if he sustains his form. There was a drop in that match against Kopfer, which I don't think another player would have, like a higher ranked player with more experience like Thiem, I don't think they would have been so forgiving of that, particularly as Thiem is so mentally tough and so gritty, and is perfectly able to transition from defending to getting on the front foot. Like, he will identify those moments and seize his opportunities. So thank you. Are we going? I'm gonna assume that we are. I'm gonna change the Wi-Fi on my laptop to something else. Okay, it's good that it hasn't dropped altogether because that's happened way too many times and I'm definitely not here for that. Okay, so Wawrinka could give team a good workout and could potentially get the win. That's the short answer. I don't have enough reasons to doubt team, and I think the whole round he's looked more solid and more convincing than my laptop hates me, my Wi-Fi hates me. So bear with me while I try and get this back. I hate technology, really do. Okay, so team looking strong, Nadal looking strong, Djokovic looking strong. I don't think, even though Wawrinka has been impressive at moments, I don't think anyone has quite got to the level of those guys yet. Not to say that that won't happen in the future, but it's always a little bit concerning for the rest of the field when those other guys have started off as convincingly as they have. Hello, right, we go again. Where are we at? Where are we at? Who is favourite if team and Wawrinka meet in round 4? Answered that one. In 2020, the only player that can beat Novak Djokovic is himself. That is a confident statement to make when we're here at the French Open that Nadal has won a total of 12 times to Djokovic's 1. The time Djokovic won the event, Nadal had withdrawn with injury. So I wouldn't be so confident on that front. I do think, as great as Djokovic is, and I've spoken tons of good stuff about him in the past. He's a mental machine. He's an elastic band at the baseline. Just even watching him today against Ricardas Berankis, the amount of balls he was able to get back in play with interest that just seemed to crush Berankis' spirit because he came out with such good intentions, attacking second serves, trying to move up the court, and then Djokovic would just ask the questions that broke him down. So I think, all round Djokovic is phenomenal, but he does have a few more dips now, as opposed to, in contrast to, for example, 2015, when he was kind of almost unstoppable for most players, even for Federer and Nadal. Djokovic was just dominating in 2015, and he's not quite that player. There are a few more chinks in the armor, very few, and he's looking imperious at the moment. But for example, if we look at the back end of last year, he had not one but 2 pretty below par matches at the ATP finals, which cost him. And it's not normal for Djokovic to not show up at a big event. I've spoken before about the Wimbledon final last year with him and Federer. I was surprised at the level from Djokovic all the way through. Yeah, he peaked where he needed to in the tie breaks, but he didn't have that sustained quality all the way through the match that we're used to seeing from him on occasions where it really matters and where it really counts. So I wouldn't say that he is quite as imperious as he was a few years ago. And for that reason, I'm not too scared about taking Nadal as the favourite at this event because there's 12 titles to back that one up. So I'm still going with Nadal at the moment. Someone says Nadal is the favourite even with the slow, heavy conditions. Yeah, because he's shown he's a worker and he'll take whatever's thrown at him and he'll get on with it. So he's been really impressive so far. What else have we got? Anything a little bit different, guys? It's getting a little bit samey. Problem for team is that every year he has to beat both Djokovic and Nadal. He can beat either, but beating both is hard. Now, that is a really good point, and that is a big reason why less players have been able to break through in the game. And they've been given a lot of stick for it, which isn't fair because the big 3 just set an incredible, phenomenal standard that is beyond the capacities of most players. They've set almost an unrealistic standard, and to have to go through one of them in best of 5 sets is difficult enough. So if beating one of them is mentally and physically taxing enough that very few do it, imagine the pressure of having to do that twice over to win a big title as well. Very few people can do that, and so that is actually a very good thing to point out. It's going to be difficult for Thiem, but if anyone can do it, I think Thiem can. He definitely has been, for me, closing the gap between him and the big three. Obviously not in terms of overall titles, but in terms of sustained level at the moment. I think he's pretty much putting himself almost on a par with Nadal and Djokovic and Federer. I'd put him in a 4 with those three, because he really has worked so hard, and I think he proved it at the US Open. You know, it was suddenly open, and he did grit across the line to take advantage when he was the obvious favourite. And whatever you think of the level in that final, that took sheer mental strength to drag himself through the way he did. So I think the Thiem's definitely closing the gap there, if he hasn't already closed it quite a bit. Someone says too long of an answer. I know, I ramble, don't I? It's the way it goes. Where are we at? Is it safe to say Djokovic wins this? No! Nadal's in the draw, guys. 12 titles. How could it possibly be safe to say that Djokovic wins at this stage? Especially after the US Open. You don't know what's going to happen in 2020. It's not safe to say anything. It's not even safe to say Nadal. It's just not. Nothing's safe. Right, where are we at? First time I'm not missing the live broadcast by 10 seconds. Good on you. Welcome. Right. Ostapenko's really going to win it again, isn't she, is the question. Do you know what? She really could. I was watching her first round with interest. Now, it was against Madison Brengle. So, I mean, Brengle's not... She's not kind of top 50 consistent quality. So that was quite a nice opener for Ostapenko. But at the same time, you know, it's the kind of match that she would have been losing on and off for the past few years, because as much as the peak level is lethal from Ostapenko, the consistency has never been there. I mean, if you remember, when she won the French Open, it was her first title outside of the ITF circuit. She'd never won a WTA title. She just peaked for a fortnight and won the French. In fact, she maybe even only peaked for the second week. And that's the thing with Ostapenko. It is dips and rises. But, you know, the only time she's ever won main draw matches here was when she won the title in 2017. So that's good signs for her. I thought it was great to see her really backing herself against Brengle, and not just the big power hitting that we know Ostapenko does so well, but also, and I did tweet about this, experimenting with the drop shot. And sometimes it was kind of disastrous, but she was comfortable enough that she was willing to use that match as almost, I don't want to say a practice match, but she used it to trial out a few things to see what would work for her. And she was driving returns to the feet. She was getting on top of them, taking them up the line. She was coming up right near the service line to return. And she was having a good go with those drop shots. So you could see that she had intentions and still has intentions for this tournament. I was taking her over Pliskova hands down. I do find some predictions at the beginning of tournaments harder early on, because you haven't had as much time to kind of assess how players are competing in certain conditions. But I was 100% taking Ostapenko to beat Pliskova, because I've said it before, I don't see Karolina Pliskova winning slams. I just don't see it happening. She's too... I mean, someone actually... it might have been Matthew Willis. If you don't follow Matthew Willis on Twitter, get across that, because he's the best follow. It might have been him that mentions kind of like a surface level, just kind of... Pliskova's very consistent, right? But she's kind of good consistent. So she doesn't get much better than her peak, and then she'll come up against players that have a really good match and take her down. Now, I don't think that Ostapenko even had to play a peak level today to take her down. I think that she just had to, you know, play a smart match, which she did, and she got on top of the game early and didn't let Pliskova into it. But yeah, I could see that result coming a mile off, because yeah, Pliskova struggles when she's put on the run. You know, she's a power player. She likes to dictate, and Ostapenko wasn't going to let her do that. So in this kind of form, you know, it's all about sustaining. Ostapenko sustains this form, and it's a tough one for whoever comes up against her, to be honest with you. So like I say, nothing's safe, but Ostapenko definitely a leading contender for me. So let me know if you agree. Where are we at? Is Halep getting her revenge tomorrow against Anisimova? Here's the thing. Anisimova has probably looked more impressive so far. I mean, she's dropped a total 4 games moving into the third round, so she dropped 2 games in each match. But she hasn't, I don't think she hasn't, let's say this in English. She she hasn't faced the same quality that Halep's faced so far, I don't think. So it could be a fight against Halep, and we'll just have to see if she's ready for that. As much as Anisimova's A game, if she brings it, is going to give Halep a lot of trouble, it's tough to see a player with Halep's, fight and experience losing to the same player at an event that she's really comfortable at twice in a row, 2 years in a row. That would be pretty gutting for Halep, and in the form that she's in, I like to think that she would be able to find a way through that, so I think it could get close. Do I dare make an outright call? I don't think I've watched either player enough to say, to be honest, but it's definitely the standout match of that round, and both players have good chances, but, with Halep's experience and ability to problem solve, her movement's looking good at the moment. Technically, she should be winning that, but she needs to bring a higher level. I think if she brings the same level that she brought in her last match, she'll probably lose. But that's my perspective on it. But I don't think that she will. I think she will bring a higher level than the second round, because the top players, they know when to bring their best. Where are we at? I reckon Thiem has surpassed Federer. As a matter of fact, it's only the major 2 that are mostly a challenge for him. It's hard to say. Federer's not around as much at the moment because of injuries, etc. I think in terms of consistency, maybe Thiem has the edge on Federer at the moment, because that's the one area where just some matches that Federer goes into, you don't know if it's going to be peak. But at his peak, Federer's the better player still. I don't think it's a contest. I think the numbers speak for themselves, but Thiem has definitely closed the gap with those guys, and I think it's good to see for the whole sport that he hasn't needed them to drop. He himself has stepped up. I think that's really impressive from Thiem, and yeah, I've got a lot of respect for what he's done over the past couple of seasons. Conditions heavy, and yeah, heavy balls favor which contenders better, Thiem, Nadal, Djokovic, or someone else? So the question here is, who do the conditions favour? I know who they don't favour, but said man, Rafael Nadal, is doing pretty well at the moment. It's worth noting that the conditions were a little bit better for Nadal in his last match, which he came through even more easily than round 1. It's scheduled to rain quite a bit for the rest of the stay in Paris, so it remains to be seen whether it gives him trouble. I think Thiem probably copes quite well with these conditions. I guess it was similar conditions when he beat Djokovic here the last time. It was wet, it was windy. Djokovic was not happy on that occasion, if I remember correctly, and Thiem was able to handle the conditions the better of the 2, which was interesting. I don't want to say these conditions would necessarily favour anyone, because technically they're not conditions that anyone should have to be playing in. It's autumn. We shouldn't be playing an outdoor clay event in autumn, but this is what 2020 has driven us to. So yeah, I wouldn't say that it necessarily favours anyone, but I would say that there are players that it is less of a disadvantage for. Let's put it that way on that occasion. And yeah, I think Nadal's challenged the most just because he doesn't get the usual kick on his serve and his forehand, which have been 2 real weapons for him over the years for the forehand, like right from day 1, but for the serve as well. The serve has become so much more of a weapon for him. It was something that he completely lacked during his Rome loss to Diego Schwartzman. It was fascinating to see that, as he fought there, he just could not find his serve to save his life, and the serve has been such a fixture for Nadal in recent times. So I think, that hurts him, because he then has to rally a bit longer, so it asks the questions of his consistency, but, Nadal is one of those players that can go all day if he needs to. It's just a question of how he's going to finish off the points if the forehand and serve aren't working to full effect. But so far he has been able to cut through the court a little better than I anticipated, so fair play to him. Where are we at? I'm not talking about the GOAT debate. I'm sorry. French Open questions only. I feel like I've talked about the GOAT debate a million times, and as I say, it's always going to be subjective. Did I see Berrettini's name? Matteo Berrettini looks good. Might give us a prize. Yeah, I was watching him a little bit before. Actually, he just completed even the lineup for the third round with a win over Lloyd Harris. He didn't come through that one without trouble, though. He was down early. He was down 4-1 or 4-2 in the first set before winning it 6-4, but then dropped the second. Harris is a good player. He took the first set off Federer, actually, at Wimbledon, I think a couple of years back, maybe 2018. But, Berrettini with that forehand, his serve, even on a clay court, he's going to be a tough customer. So, I mean, I wouldn't be marking him down to do anything huge. I mean, he might prove me wrong, but I wouldn't be marking him down to do anything huge. But he's got a nice little part of the draw. The guy he's playing in the next round, I'm not going to try and pronounce his surname. No, I'd probably better. So it's Daniel Altmeyer. I've not heard an umpire say his name yet. And you often, when I'm watching these, because I've seen some of these guys at challenges, I watch on mute, so I don't get the pronunciation, but I'm going to go with like Altmeyer or something. But he qualified for the event and beat Jan-Lennard Struff in the last round in straight sets, which was a really good win for him. Struff has been in great form the past couple of seasons. From what I saw, don't think he had his best day today. It was a limp finish from him, but he probably felt the pressure, going up against a fellow German, very much the player expected to win. So great for Altmeyer at his first ever Grand Slam to make round 3, but that's a very winnable match for Berrettini, and he is in the more open Djokovic half of the draw, the top half. So there are definite opportunities for him, but I don't know that I'd see him pulling off any surprises. I'd rate him more on a hard court. He's done well at the US Open, for example. So yeah, I'd rate him more there, I think. Oh my days. Any opinions on the hot mess that was Kiki Bertens versus Sara Errani? I did miss the majority of that match. That's a really noisy bottle, sorry. I would expect that even if you didn't watch that match, you'd have at least heard about it in the media. Because that, I think, when tennis gets dramatic, then it makes the mainstream. It doesn't make it for quality of tennis, it doesn't make it for good results, makes it for the bad stuff, but hey ho, that's the way it goes. But yeah, so Bertens was cramping. She entered the match with full body cramps after she beat Sara Errani 9-7 in the third set, but Errani was disgraceful in terms of her on-court conduct. She was mimicking Bertens' cramping, making out that she was faking it. She swore at the top of her voice as she marched off the court afterwards, didn't acknowledge Bertens at the net, no racket tap or anything. It went beyond being cold and actually got nasty and ugly, which I was surprised to see because I thought that Errani had, quite a decent reputation off court. She was clearly wound up. Even suggested in press afterwards that Bertens had been making the whole thing up because she'd seen her sat in the restaurant previously and she looked fine. I mean, does she understand cramp? It doesn't exactly hang along for a long time. It comes and goes. That's the way it works. And Bertens was, in floods of tears, like sobbing at the end of that match. And for a player that works hard, knows what it is to feel pain, that is, she's not going to be someone that exaggerates it. And what hit most for me with that as well, and I didn't see anyone mention it, Bertens, when she made the semi-finals here a few years ago, it was such a huge story because she's a cancer survivor. During her playing career, she had and overcame cancer. And that just made this hit even more for me because I'm like, wow, the audacity to stand there on the court and make out that a player who's clearly in pain is completely faking it. A player that's been through something like that, a player that knows what it is to fight and to suffer and to come through. I just thought it was madly disrespectful from Errani and a terrible look for the sport. And I understand contentions in the heat of the moment and getting frustrated and stuff, but I mean, that kind of thing, going to those extremes, that just shouldn't be acceptable, really. It's not a good look. So yeah, hot mess indeed. Um, does Sophia Kennen stand a chance? I think she's just starting to get her confidence back, Kennen, because she looked in pieces at the US Open. She got absolutely thrashed by, I think it was Elise Mertens, wiped off the court. She was in tears before the match had even ended. And it's got to feel like a bit of a whirlwind for Kennen at the moment because she's a Grand Slam champion. But when she started off at the Australian Open in January, no one would have called her to win it. So she was an outsider that won, and suddenly she has this sustain, this reputation. Can we speak English, Abigail? Okay, suddenly she has to sustain this reputation of being a Grand Slam champion, but there wasn't that smooth of a journey to becoming a Slam champ. It was kind of like going up, and then she took a massive jump to being a Slam champion as opposed to like going swiftly all the way up. So at the moment she's struggling. I think there's a little bit of panic because she knows there are certain matches that by status she shouldn't be losing, but she is actually still developing as a player. So it's probably been quite embarrassing for her recently, some of the matches that she's been losing. She got thumped by Azarenka love and love in, I think it was Rome a couple of weeks ago. So I think it was important for her to kind of scrape through her last couple of wins. I watched parts of her match against Anna Bogdan, who's actually the first player I ever commentated on when I started WTA commentary in 2018. And the reason I was commentating on her was because I was doing an outside match, and she's one of those ones where, you know, if it goes drastically, terribly wrong, you know, there's not going to be many people around to kind of take note of it. So yeah, she's made a little bit of progress since then, but Bogdan is still, I'd say, still one of those players that hits a nice ball, but, you know, doesn't really have a lot of weapons. So that was a match Kennen should definitely have been winning, and she did, but she had to come from a set down to do it. So 3 sets against Ludmila Samsonova, 3 sets against Anna Bogdan. Hasn't been necessarily convincing, but I think it's maybe what she needs just to get the match practice, get the time on court, and get herself into a position where she's backing herself a little bit more. She is on the what was the emptier half of the draw. Now, with the absence of Serena and Azarenka and Venus, who went out round 1, there's quite a few notable names that are now suddenly out of the top half of the draw. And Kennen is in the more opportune section of the draw as the number 4 seed, so she does have a very winnable third round in Arena Barra, and she might just have got her full confidence back by the time she moves into round 4. So I would not see her winning this tournament at all. But, you know, she's getting back to the form that she should be in at her ranking and at her seeding. So that's my thoughts on Kennen. Question from Canada: is Eugenie Bouchard actually making a comeback? Has her game improved? Bouchard's an interesting talking point because those that have followed me for a number of years will know that I never really rated her. No, I did not rate her as a player at all. I thought she could hit a good ball, you know, I thought she could play, but here's another occasion where a player had one good run and, you know, she was marketable, this kind of stuff. So she was overhyped. She was the WTA's new darling, and they kind of made her out to be a much better and more developed player than she was. So my issue was not with Bouchard and her game so much as, you know, the complete overhype that surrounded her. Which might have looked like it was backed up because she did make that Wimbledon final, you know, but after that one good season that she had, she's just gone down, and there was one season where she just completely went off the radar. Not because she was injured, because she had lost all her confidence, and that was her biggest weapon, I felt at the time, because here was what I always felt about Bouchard, okay? She was a player, she could take it to her opponents, but she only ever had plan A. She only ever had the bludgeon the ball until your opponent can't get it back. When there were inevitably players that could go toe-to-toe with her or out-hit her, she didn't have another option. So it was very one-dimensional. And from what I saw, she didn't do a lot of work to change that. The best I ever saw her play was probably a match against Dominika Sabalenka at the US Open. I think maybe the same tournament where she had that slip and she got a concussion, and that messed with her for a while. But I still need to see that second layer from Bouchard. But I never wrote her off because I knew that when she was confident, she could definitely be a solid top 100, solid top 50 player. And somehow she's got that confidence back. And I think that this lockdown has really worked in her favor because it's given her a little bit of time to catch her breath. She was on a rankings free fall. She was tumbling down the rankings. She was having to play ICF events, etc. And she's been able to, gather herself, take some time to look at what needs working on, what she needs to do. Then she came back, and for those that don't remember, the only WTA title that Bouchard has won to date was a little clay court event that was in the shadow of the French Open. So a lot of players had already gone to Paris to compete, and I think it was the week before she was one of a few top players that decided to play this event in, I think, Lyon, and she won that event. So she seized her opportunity. She did a similar thing a few weeks ago when during the second week of the US Open, she took part in an event that was obviously a depleted field because a number of the top players were either at the US Open or didn't want to play on clay yet. And she made the final. She didn't win, but she made the final. And match wins get you confidence. And I have watched a little bit of Bouchard at the French just to see if, my suspicions were correct, that she was going to come back through. And I liked what I saw against Daria Gavrilova. She was moving in, she was looking to play from on top of the baseline and attack, and she was not holding back from moving into the court to finish things off as well, which shows a lot of confidence and a lot of backing herself. She looks a lot more relaxed on the court, she's not making rushy errors and that type of thing. So for her to be a really great player, I still think that she needs to do more with her game, but for the moment, she's got the confidence. And I think you would call it a comeback. I mean, compared to what she was ranked outside the top 300, 400 at one point. This is, she's climbed a couple of hundred ranking spots in a few weeks. So, yeah, it's a comeback. Will she ever get to the rankings that she was at before? With her current ability, I would say that she shouldn't. But, it's a mental game. Particularly on the women's circuit, and if you've got the confidence and the belief in yourself, anything's possible. So yeah, she's definitely on the climb, and I think her next match against Iga Swiatek will be probably insightful for her because Swiatek should really win that match. Both of them can hit a big ball, but Swiatek can do the other stuff. She's got a fantastic drop shot. She reads the game incredibly well. She constructs the points fantastically. She took out Marketa Vondrousova, last year's finalist in the first round. So that's a match that Swiatek should be winning, and if Bouchard can come through it, then that actually signaled that the self-confidence and the drive and the belief is well and truly back. But I think we can already take that is the case for Bouchard. She's definitely on her way back through. Jabeur versus Sabalenka winner. Oh, are they playing each other next? It's so hard for me to keep on top of everything in my head of who is where. Let me just check to make sure. I do trust you, but just for my own peace of mind, yeah. Sabalenka, the number 8 seed, up against Ons Jabeur, the number 30 seed, and a favourite player of many at the moment for her ability to just play such a different game. She hits a ball that these conditions probably quite favour. She hits quite a heavy shot, but she can really utilise the backhand slice as well and that kind of thing. I'm sorry, I feel like there's something just completely stuck in my throat tonight. I went on a run this afternoon. It's never quite cleared. It's not corona, don't worry. But yeah, so Jabeur, has these different dimensions to her game that make her really tricky to play against. I wouldn't necessarily be convinced that clay's her best surface, but she can definitely utilize these conditions. Sabalenka is an interesting one because she's so back and forth. She was really establishing herself as pretty consistent in 2018, and it's almost a surprise for me to see her seeded number 8 because I was getting used to seeing her knocked out quite early at majors. Good for her to come through Kasatkina, though. Kasatkina was getting going again, you know, in Rome before she had that horrible fall against Azarenka and had to stop that match. She was playing at a really good level. She is a player who can utilize the surface of clay, and Sabalenka bageled her in that second set, 7-6, 6-love. Now, I've not seen enough of Sabalenka to know if she'll be able to manage with this match, but I do know that Jabeur is going to make her uncomfortable. She's going to move her around a bit more, and she's really going to ask the questions. And I'd be willing to take Jabeur for the upset there. I think that people probably put too much faith in her at the moment just because she's so highly rated, but 110%, if I can even say that, this is a winnable match for her. And yeah, I think, you know, a limited amount of watching both of them recently, but I think I'd take Jabeur in that one, unless Sabalenka's really confident. Harris Federer feels like a decade ago. Yeah, but it was last year. It was last year. Okay, yeah, it feels like it doesn't feel as recently as last year. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun or when you're in lockdown. Either or maybe both. Does Yannick Sinner stand a chance to make it to the finals? Oh, well, it's very difficult to give many people a chance to make the final when you've got the likes of Nadal and Djokovic and Thiem looking strong. But let's, I'm just going to try and find where Sinner is in the draw because I lose track. So where is he? You know, he's been in good form recently. I really rate him as a player. A lot of people do. You know, he's well known for a reason. Obviously will have grown up playing on the clay as well, so that's an asset for him. Where's he at? Yeah, so he's got a really winnable next match actually against Federico Coria. But he would come up against Nadal prior to the semis, I think. And he's looking at facing the winner of Zverev or Cecchinato in the fourth rounds. So either of them I think would be a challenging match for him. I think if Zverev gets there, you know, it wasn't a great level from Zverev in his last match by his own admission, but like a top player, he still managed to win the key points, so you've got to give him credit for that. And I think if Zverev does get around further, he'll really have had to raise his game because he's up against Cecchinato, who beat Djokovic here a few years ago, is a former semi-finalist. And, you know, the last time he won, similar to Ostapenko, the only time he won matches in the main draw here, he went to the semis. So it indicates a good run for him. He's come through qualifying, so he's in good form. He utilizes the drop shot incredibly well. He's got a good variety to his game. So I think whoever comes through out of Zverev and Cecchinato, if Sinner is to take them on, that would be a really tricky match for him, and I'm not sure that I'd be picking him to come through at this point. He's still developing. I think for a lot of players, you know, you've just got to get used to that best of five, and it's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. But I think it might be a bit premature for Sinner to make the final, I think. This is not a question. Someone's just put Azarenka. Well, what about Azarenka? Lost in the second round, pretty comprehensively, actually, to Anna Karolina Shmiedlova. Now, I mean, I didn't necessarily have Azarenka as a title contender coming into this because, you know, clay's never been her best surface. But I do feel like she's underrated just because she hasn't had the same kind of results on clay as she's had on the faster surfaces, hard courts and grass courts. So based on her form and her confidence, I was willing to give her a shot here. I think you've just got to hand it to Shmiedlova because I did say, you know, this is, on a lesser scale, this is kind of becoming to her what Wimbledon is to Sabine Lisicki. That one place where you just completely feel at home and you're able to produce your best. Because Shmiedlova, we know that she's got a degree of talent, but the consistency has just been up and down like a yo-yo. And for her to be Azarenka and Venus, two big names back to back, you know, Venus not in great form at the moment, let's be realistic. But that's still two major names, two holders of Grand Slam titles. So I think huge for her that she can come through those two matches in straight sets. The 6-2, 6-2 win over Azarenka, so fluid and so balanced on the move when she was being run around. You know, her defense to attack was brilliant. The strike that she had on the ball, Azarenka was just struggling to find a way through her. She tried to drive, she tried drop shots, she tried moving in, and she did not have answers for Shmiedlova on that day. So you completely got to give Shmiedlova props and credit there. And for Azarenka, you know, it's not a killer, really. She would have given herself more chances at the US, I think, than the French Open. So she'll bounce back, and she's got such a good outlook on life and tennis at the moment anyway. She's just very content. So I think that she'll handle herself just fine. Another question on the Bouchard resurgence. If you missed my answer on that, you can rewind. But yeah, it is a resurgence for her, I think. And even if she doesn't go any further here, I think we'll be seeing a bit more of her at this level in the future. What do you think about Ons Jabeur performance in her 2020 season? I've not watched her. I don't think I've watched her at all here. So when I was making that prediction for her against Sabalenka, I was basing it on what I know of her and her results in the past. So yeah, I can't really talk about what she's done here so far, but her season, she's just becoming more and more steady and backing herself on the big stages against the big name players, and it's good to see. You know, she's got that depth to her game, and I don't know if I'd have her down as a slam champion at the moment, but she's definitely one of those names who I think is going to be known as, you know, a giant slayer, a tricky opponent, someone to be aware of, maybe a dark horse. So yeah, definitely she's one to keep a good eye on as things progress. Will French Open return to regular balls next year? Why was there a change this year? Good question. I should have looked up on that because I was asking the same question the other day. Why change? I mean, I figured it had something to do with the season and, you know, so many other things being different this year. But personally, I feel that, you know, if so many other things are different, you want to hang on to as much that is the same as possible for the sake of all concerned. You know, the players that are having to play in pretty, you know, less than ideal conditions. So I don't understand the thought process of changing the ball at all, but all I can say is with the outcry that's come from pretty much everyone that's used them, I don't think they'll be trying that one again in future. So it's trial and error, hey, on the front of the balls. Someone says they signed a five-year deal with Wilson. No, does that mean they'll be using them in future years? Someone needs to rip up that contract. Dearie me. Wow. Okay. I'll have to read up a little bit more on that one. That's yeah, slightly concerning for some of the players. Lost where I am now. Wow. Okay. Glad Ostapenko is looking like she's in form. Conditions here suit her. Yeah, and I think it just helps, you know, when you've got those good memories. I'm sure when she was out on a big court against Pliskova earlier today, you know, those good feelings just came back, and she'll know for sure that, you know, the only time she's won main draw here previously is when she went to the trophy. So that's got to give her a good mentality. Sloane Stephens was fairly disappointing today, someone says. Would you agree? I didn't watch any of it, but yeah, I was disappointed when I saw, not because I wanted her to win or anything, but because that she was kind of a dark horse for me for the reasons that I referenced surrounding Yelena Ostapenko and Garbine Muguruza. You know, a player that's done well here before. She made the final in 2018, lost to Halep. So she's someone that's performed here in the past. Didn't have the form coming in, but has the ability to do well on the surface. So I did, and she was in the bottom half of the draw, so which is more open. So I did have her as kind of a dark horse to keep an eye on. And I mean, she lost to Paula Badosa-Gibet, who, I mean, I've seen, she's Spanish, okay, so generally, you know, if you're from Spain, you've had that background of being brought up on clay, you know, clay will be her better surface, but I have seen, you know, this girl get thrashed at ITF events. So for someone of Stephens' caliber and ability across surfaces, that's a match she should have won. And, you know, her ranking is slipping down. She's seated at 29 at the moment. She's I think she'll have a lot to take away from that, and you know, I do think that we'll be seeing Stevens challenge for majors again, or at least, you know, be at the back end, because she's too talented, I think, not to be challenging in those stages. But she is in a bit of a rough patch at the moment, so maybe it was a little bit confident from me to suggest, just because of the reasons of her being successful here previously, that she might be a dark horse on this occasion. Thank you for the insight. Thank you for watching. Very much appreciated. And if you don't catch this live, it will have processed and be up at some point, and you can catch it a bit later on. Now, a few more minutes and I'm going to head off. So any last minute questions, get them in quick, and I'll try and make my answers a bit more concise. Oh, here we go. This is interesting. Who's your pick for dark horse among the women? I think I've referenced it. I mean, it's hard on the women's side to pick between outright contenders and dark horses, because the lines kind of blur. They're all kind of the same. So I guess you'd put it as Halep's the leading contender, or the leading contender, because of her form and because of her status. But the likes of Ostapenko and Muguruza are dark horses because I'm picking them more based on previous achievements than form coming in. But I think both of them are in pretty decent form. So yeah, but also, you know, Anisimova. I mean, the Halep Anisimova match is a big one for me in terms of who's going to make the final rounds. I think whichever of those two comes through should at least be making the semis, if not the final, out of Halep and Anisimova. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. Someone says, I really miss Andreescu and Barty. I enjoy their tennis, more variety than Osaka. Yeah, so Andreescu, Barty, and Osaka were the three that were kind of establishing themselves as consistent at the top. And that is true. Osaka can do a little bit more with the angles and the power, but those two, Andreescu and Barty, can still pack a good punch, and they've got great control of the slice, and, you know, coming in, using all areas of the court. I think, both of them have very much missed, not just here, but in other tournaments as well that they haven't taken part in. It'll be good to see them back. Thoughts on Svetlana Pironkova? She the new GOAT. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say it's very impressive, you know, to come back after 3 years having given birth and just get straight back to work. You know, she had a fantastic performance at the US Open, and, you know, Serena was most definitely injured, but maybe she'd have thought a little bit longer before withdrawing if it hadn't been Pironkova that she was about to face, because she would have known that that was going to be a tough contest. Pironkova was going to make her move, and that is no good for that Achilles. So the moment she sees Pironkova's name, I think that match is a no-go. So yeah, Pironkova is definitely a threat, and was prior to her initial retirement, if you can call it that. Yeah, she obviously had those wins over Venus at Wimbledon, and she's done well to just get straight back to business. Credit to her. What do I think of Rublev? I think he's in great form, and I think he should make the semis based on the draws that I looked at during this live stream. Thoughts on Rublev? Whether he will or not, you know, the tiredness and the other things might catch up with him, but he's definitely a strong shot based on his section of the draw at the moment. More mentally tough than Tsitsipas and Zverev is the question regarding Rublev. It's hard to say, because, you know, Tsitsipas and Zverev, both ATP finals champions. Zverev multiple times a Masters 1000 champ. I think it's kind of mean for people to say, well, not mean, that sounds a pathetic word, unfair for people to say that Zverev isn't mentally tough. You know, he does have his moments within matches, you know, with the double faults and stuff, where, you know, there are mental kind of failings that are exposed. But, you know, overall, the majority of occasions, like in his match against Pierre Herbert, where he did not play a good match, he was still able to pinpoint the key moments and peak for them. And the guy's 23 and has won multiple, I think 4 Masters 1000 titles. That's not the signal of a mentally weak player to me. Also has multiple wins over, you know, the likes of Djokovic, Nadal, so not Nadal, but, you know, top players. Federer he's beaten. So yeah, I think it's a little bit unfair to suggest that he's not mentally tough. There are definitely mentally tougher players than those two, but yeah, I wouldn't say that they're not mentally tough. Okie doke. I'm gonna leave that last question. Right, guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be doing one more of these Q&As after third round action. So that will be on Saturday at some point. I'm going to have to think about what time I do that, but I'll let you know. I'll schedule it. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in live. I appreciate not talking to thin air. It's always nice when some of you can tune in at this point in time. But if you haven't been able to tune in live, this video will be available at some point for you to skip through at your pleasure whenever you want to. So thank you very much for joining. Get some good questions for next time. Thanks for the ones you sent in tonight. Really interesting stuff. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you at the next video.